So some of you will already know Will. He is a consultant speaker and researcher at Work Learning Research and a world-renowned thought leader focused on research-based practices for learning, work, performance, presentations, and evaluations, and a really great advocate for learning professionals like us. You might know Will's book, Performance Focused Learner Surveys, and as I mentioned, he's also recently published a second book, The CEO's Guide to Training, E-Learning and Work, which he's going to talk to us a little bit about today. You might also know Will from LTEM, the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model, which I think many of you will be familiar with. So yeah, Will's got tons of fascinating insights for us today. So we're really delighted to welcome him to give today's keynote. And I'll hand over to you, Will.
Great. Thank you so much. And first, as I'm getting set up here, a big shout out to Totoro for giving us a free conference. That is so awesome. Thank you very much. And Rachel and Matt and Ashley behind the scenes, thank you for inviting me and organizing this. It looks simple, everybody, when you see them, but I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Can you see my screen okay? Good. Okay.
Yeah, that's all great.
All right. So we're talking about learning with impact. My title is From Order Taker to Competitive Advantage. Our impact depends on our empowerment. So I always like to start, let's think about the work that we do. We are learning and performance professionals, and we help a lot of people doing a lot of different types of jobs. And, you know, we don't only help them in their current jobs, but we help them in their careers, with their confidence, with their sense of identity. And this has ripple effects into their family finances, into their communities. We're doing good work for our learners, also for our organizations. We help large organizations, we help small organizations, organizations of all types. Given how much impact we're having on the learners and our organizations, we should probably give ourselves some love. And we should even give ourselves some more love, because our job is not an easy one, right? We have to know so many things. We probably have to know the learning sciences. We have to know how to do a needs assessment and evaluation, all these technologies we have to know. Also, we have to have emotional intelligence and know how to run a project, et cetera, et cetera. So our job is not always easy, but we are doing good work. We're in a noble profession. At the same time, we do have our frustrations. And, you know, I've been in the field a long time. You probably can't tell. I've been in the field a long time. And one of the major complaints that L&D folks have, we hate to be thought of as order takers. Hey, we need this e-learning course by next Tuesday. Can you crank it out for us? Hey, we've got these PowerPoint slides. Can you turn them into a course? We hate that because we know we can be doing so much more. When we can't do things like a serious needs assessment, when we don't have any access to the work performance context, when we can't do evaluation to get feedback to make things better, when we can't try new and innovative things out, we feel stuck. The other thing is, and this term, get a seat at the table, has been in conferences through all my decades in the field. We feel we can't get connected to our senior leadership. We can't get the resources we need. We can't partner with them. They don't always understand the work that we're doing. And this becomes a major point of frustration. So, you know, Rachel kicked us off with some optimism. I want to give you a chance to vent a little bit, if you'd like. What frustrations have you experienced or seen? And you can put your frustrations in the chat, and let's have some fun with this. Let it out. This is our big opportunity to get it off our chest. What frustrations have you seen, particularly in being able to do the work that we want to do, the work that we know would be most effective?
Yeah, Cammy's kicked it off with getting a seat at the table.
Yeah, Cammy, great to see you here.
Not being involved early enough in the process, Will. The new technology will fix everything. Compliance training has killed real training, just click, click, click. Unclear targets from stakeholders, lack of time for relevant stakeholders to work thoroughly. As soon as I need support from other departments, takes a long time.
Long time.
Lack of resources. Training development is the same as creating PowerPoints, right? Managers just expect the training to be a problem without them getting involved. Leadership not understanding, I think that's a big one as well. Leadership not understanding the importance of training. No voice with decision making. Limited time. Training will fix behaviors that are not being challenged by the manager. Yeah, lots of different ideas coming in here, Will.
Wow, it's great. I'd encourage you to grab that slider on your chat window and just peruse those a bit. You get a sense that at least some of us have some frustrations some of the time. Let's switch gears a minute. I'm going to introduce myself now. Probably helpful to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. I like to always give people a sense of what my sweet spots might be, what my blind spots might be, where my perspectives might come from, where my biases might come from. So a little introduction before we get started. I've been in the field, I don't know, 35, 40 years, something like that. You can see I've played a number of different roles. Work learning research is where I've spent most of my time. You know, that may sound like a 10,000 person consultancy, but it's basically me. I've been a consultant, also worked for 2 organizations along the way, Tier 1 Performance and the Strategic Management Group. I've had a real privilege as a consultant to work with hundreds of different organizations over the years, from the US Navy SEALs to Oxfam, the anti-poverty folks, Bloomberg, Genentech, Pfizer, universities like MIT, Tufts, the World Bank, the CDC, and small training and development companies as well. And I learned a lot from that work and from the people I worked with. One of the things I'm known for is doing research translations. Most years I read over 200 articles from the scientific refereed journals on learning, memory, and instruction, and then translate that research into practical recommendations. I obviously use that in my consulting work, but I also write research to practice reports. We're going to give you access to the slides later, so you don't have to take screenshots or write these down. But the Work Learning Research Catalog has these. They're all available for free. I'm also done a lot of work in learning evaluation. Rachel mentioned my book on performance-focused learner surveys and the LTEM framework. LTEM framework is a learning evaluation model. I'll talk a little bit about it later. There's a 52-page report that goes along with it. By the way, for those of you who've been following LTEM, there's a new version out, so go check that out. Also teach a workshop called the LTEM Bootcamp. It's about LTEM, but about learning evaluation in general. And recently published this book. It's a book for senior leaders and for us as learning professionals. My goal was to help senior leaders understand the work that we do so that they could better partner with us, they could better resource us, that they would understand some of our struggles and some of our opportunities to help them, to help us create a competitive advantage. But it's also for us as learning professionals. I sort of believe that we need to empower ourselves as well. You'll see the theme of that as we go forward. So my challenge for you here today is a lot of what I share with you is going to resonate with you. You're going to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of what I share may challenge your long-held view of what our job is. I'm going to encourage you to have sort of a childlike curiosity and openness to these things. Look at those beautiful faces. I know we in L&D tend to be, you know, not only smart, but also pretty good looking as well. So that's the root of it. Why do we need empowerment? The subtitle of my book is How to Empower Ourselves, How to Empower Learning for a Competitive Advantage. Well, one reason is this is sort of our world. We try to get learners up a learning curve. That's not always easy. And then we got to make sure that they continue after learning. So here's during learning, this is after learning. We hope that they are continuing to learn on the job. And we can set them up for this future and avoid forgetting, because we don't want that, through the design of the learning and the after learning follow through. This is not easy. In fact, I'm going to really break it down into more depth so we can think about why we need to be empowered. This is the causal pathway from learning to results. Obviously, this doesn't include everything, but these are some of the major things. First, we've got to create valid, relevant, credible content. We don't want to teach them bad stuff, right? So we do good work on that. Then we might have to make sure that our learners are paying sufficient attention to the learning. You know, we talk about engagement, but I really learned a lot from my doctoral dissertation advisor, Ernie Rothkopf, and he coined this term, methemogenic, which means to give rise to learning. And what he was saying there was, it's not enough just to engage our learners and grab their attention, but we have to grab their attention in a way that helps them learn. So we've got to do these things, and then we have to make sure that our learners comprehend clearly and fully the concepts and skills. Now, this is where we tend to work in. This is how we tend to be thought of, but you can see there's a lot more coming. We also, if we're going to be super successful, we need to make sure that our learners are motivated to apply what they've learned. They're prepped for decision making. Not that they just know information, but they can actually make decisions with that information. They're prepped for remembering. We saw in the earlier graph, if people learn but forget, that's not good enough. And they need to be prepped for action. Are they able to do remember things in the right context? Do they are able to face up with obstacles? Are they able to be resilient? You can see this is the learning side, but then there's the work side as well. If we're really going to be successful, we need to do some other things. We got to make sure that maybe the context is triggering and nudging the right thinking and action. We know that if we simulate over here, that people are more likely to remember what they've learned. And we can use other work stimuli also to stimulate thinking and action. We also want to make sure that we're supporting the learners in applying the learning. Maybe they need resources, maybe they need reminders, maybe they need some other things. And also our learners aren't automatons. They are self-directed. And if we can sort of help them leverage that self-direction to apply the learning, we're going to get more impact. So here's what we're aiming for. Our impact, we want the learning to transfer into work behavior. You can see I've indexed it based on LTEM. And then we want the effects of transfer. So we want good results for our learners and for our organization, et cetera. Think about all these things we have to do. We tend to be empowered to do these things, but not so much some of these things. How are we gonna do that? Well, I'm going to talk about some ways. All right, switching gears for a second. Let's talk about the senior leadership. What are they thinking? This was a PricewaterhouseCoopers research study of CEOs, and this statistic is just stunning. 45% of CEOs say they are not confident their companies will survive more than 10 years on their current path. That's like 50% of CEOs are not confident. They say reinvention of their organizations is critical. And what they also found or suggest is that they think a lack of skills in their company workforce was one of their most important barriers to this reinvention. Hey, look at that. Isn't this where we can play a role? They followed this up with another study of chief human resource officers and human capital leaders. And they found that 51% of CHROs report investing in skills development in areas like AI is a significant challenge. Again, this is where we play a role. This was the conference board. They asked senior leaders, what are the internal factors or issues you think will have the greatest impact on your business? And they came up with 6 things. You can see 2 of the 6 are related to talent and upskilling and reskilling talent. Isn't that where we play a role? So you can see we are sort of central to the success of our organizations. Here's a KPMG research from a few months ago. CEOs recognize they need to future-proof the skill sets of their people and demonstrate increased employee value proposition to attract and retain talent. And one more, this is from an edX study. It was actually an AI research that they did, but one question they asked really jumped out to me. They asked this question, they asked it of the C-suite on this side and the employees on this side. And the C-suite said, based on your observations, how satisfied are your employees with your company's learning and development program? 65% of the C-suite said, hey, pretty good, very satisfied. But the employees, on the other hand, felt about half that confident in their training and development. So not great. A little bit disconnect for our senior leaders. Which brings us to the question, what don't senior leaders? We're trying to partner with them. We're trying to use our knowledge of business. We're trying to use our skill set to partner with them to get resources, etc. But sometimes there's a disconnect. In your experience, or with your best guess, what don't senior leaders know about the work of L&D? You can put your answer in the chat.
Interesting. Yeah, Cammy's saying just on the slide before there, well, as well, there's a classic disconnect between perception and reality between the CEOs and the workforce leadership team.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really, it's really fascinating because we are providing them with information every year. We have to go up in front of them and give them our evaluation results, etc.
Yeah, Michelle's saying here it takes time. Aline saying it's more than a PowerPoint. Beth, we can help skills, so we can help skill people for the future, not just fix problems. There's a difference between content and instruction. That's about behavior change. A good learning journey is more than just the e-learning. If you put content out there, that just means people will learn. That's a misrepresentation. They don't know what is effective learning, don't realize how people learn to retain information and affect change. We need to action items, not just a document, an SL. They don't understand the amount of discovery work required to really get to understand the issues. The workload there that is behind L&D as well. Everything
I like Charmaine's. They know very little. One of the themes I'm seeing in there is that they don't understand the depth of the work that we do or what's required. They tend to think it's easier than we're able to create. What else do you see, Matt?
Yeah, the idea, like you say, the idea that they think L&D will solve all the problems. Everyone's gonna magic things away or make things better just independently. Small training won't change rooted behaviors as well. Yeah, how to actually shift those behaviors. They don't see their training as something that will help their career as well. It's like maybe a misalignment between what the company wants, what the person wants.
A great list.
Yeah.
We should capture this and maybe publish it somewhere. All right. All right, let's move forward here. I'm going to share a few things that I think that L&D or that senior leaders don't know. One thing I don't think they know is that there's this amazing body of research that we draw on from the learning sciences. These are some books that sort of compile some of that research, but there's this amazing body of evidence, and they don't know that we're using this, that we're able to use this to get good results. Of course, that takes time. Another thing they don't know is about what learners know. Now, we're all learners. I'm a learner. You all out there are learners. This is some really fascinating research. Shows that learners don't always know their own learning, that learners have misconceptions about learning. I'm going to share some headlines from different scientific studies. I'll let you skim through those. In fact, there's 3 recent reviews of the scientific research that show that learners have a lack of knowledge about learning. So when senior leadership, when they're thinking about our work, they say, hey, it should be easy to create a course. Just ask your learners, what's the best way to design it for them. And then when you're evaluating learning, you can just give a simple smile sheet, happy sheet, and get feedback because the learners will tell you what they need. Well, this research is very clear that maybe that's not going to work so easily for us. Another thing that senior leaders don't know is that experts tend to be bad at teaching. Not all of them, of course, but there's this thing called the curse of knowledge, where if you're an expert, sometimes you have a hard time, or many times, or usually you have a hard time explaining the concepts in a way that learners are going to understand. You're an expert, you don't remember what it's like to be a novice, to be sort of struggling with these new concepts. So experts tend to be bad at teaching. And the way senior leaders see this is, hey, we've got all these subject matter experts in our organization. It should be simple. You just get them to create a PowerPoint, and maybe you training folks can pretty up the PowerPoint and give them a few tips. They don't know how hard it is for us to extract good information from subject matter experts and support them, support our courses, etc. Another thing that senior leaders don't know is that some of the learning data we provide to them is crap data. Truly, we give them things like, well, we had this many learners go through our courses this year, and we had this much of our completion rates. None of that is really valuable because people could go through things, they could complete them, but not learn, or they could learn the wrong thing, or they could be demotivated. We also give them happy sheet data, which is not very useful for the most part, unless they're well designed. So this is another disconnect that senior leaders might have. Ideally, what we're doing is we're creating a partnership between us and our senior leaders. I got ChatGPT to paint this picture for me. ChatGPT thinks that another thing we need to do is to dress in sort of drab colors and sit very straight in our chairs. But our goal is to have that partnership, have that seat at the table, and really be empowered to do the work that we want to do. So we're aiming for impact, right? And that's what this whole conference is about. We want to have an impact, like smashing that pinata and having the juicy goodness fall at our feet. We want impact. We've been talking about this for many years. When we look at our causal pathway, we're really talking about this. We want learning to transfer to work behavior. We want the effects of transfer, benefits for our learners and our organizations. Getting to impact, though, is harder. We need to be doing a lot of this stuff, and some of it we're doing, some of it we're not doing. But we need to do this. We need to be empowered to do some of this so that we can have maximum impact. Now, let's be real about how we measure impact. When we measure impact, we typically are measuring one course, right? We're going to look at our leadership, high potential leadership program. We're going to measure that. We're going to check its ROI, et cetera. But let's ask our CEO, what does she want from L&D? What impact do you want us in L&D to produce? Impact from learning and development. Well, I don't want course results. I don't want just learning. I don't want just work improvements. Ideally, what I hope for is a business result that gives us a competitive advantage. And if you're in a nonprofit or if you're in a university, sometimes we're still competing. One university competes with another. One department, one organization competes with another for sponsors, donations, et cetera. But even if that's not true, we're still aiming for excellence, aiming for some sort of advantage. Let me ask you this question. How is your L&D team doing in creating impact? And you're going to have 5 choices. Here they are. We do not often measure impact, so I'm not sure. And you can put A, B, C, or D in the chat. You can vote. You can choose more than one of these if you want. We measure impact with surveys, so I can't be sure. We measure knowledge, decision-making, and task performance, so I'm fairly confident we are creating impact. We measure work impact with some partially rigorous evaluation practice, so I'm somewhat confident we are creating impact. Or E, we measure impact rigorously, so I know we are creating impact. Okay, I see a lot of A's and B's. Oh, good, there's some D's. Okay, I don't see any E's yet. Maybe I missed them. There's so many of you taking a vote here. Some organizations forbid us from measuring impact. That's not good. All right, great. So we're leaning toward A and B. Obviously, and this is related, this is aligned with the research. I've done a bunch of research over the years asking L&D professionals like yourselves, are you able to do the learning measurement you want to do? And most people say, no, we're not able to do that. Usually comes in about 25% are able to do the measurement they want to. The rest of us are not able to do what we know would be good for us. All right, now let's talk about creating a competitive advantage. In sports, it's easy. We have one football team against another, and maybe we have the best striker, and that gives us a competitive advantage. Here at fencing, you can see this person has has been successful in this bout. I don't know fencing, but maybe they're not bouts, whatever they are. Maybe this person is quicker. Maybe they have better defense. Maybe they have better offensive moves. Maybe they have more experience. So there's competitive advantage there. Let's think about it in the world of business. And we'll start with small business because it's easier to see sometimes there. This is a restaurant. How might they create a competitive advantage? Well, maybe they have the friendliest staff, maybe the most organized staff. Maybe the ambiance within the restaurant is really wonderful. Maybe the best foods, the best sourcing, the best chefs. Okay, pretty easy. Now, this is a farmer's market, and this farmer has a competitive advantage because his or her fruits and vegetables look amazing. So that's their competitive advantage. But a few stalls down, there's another farmer that's using organic regenerative agriculture, and their vegetables may not look quite as good, but they're free of pesticides. And maybe for some members of the customer base, that's a competitive advantage. So you can see it can work both ways. It doesn't have to be a sort of global competitive advantage. There can be competitive advantages and disadvantages. A baker. This baker uses the best bakers, the best ovens, the best wheat and other grains, but they have this competitive advantage because they've figured out a way to get the beautiful smell of the bakery into their showrooms, and that's a competitive advantage for them. Even hairstylists, right? The best stylists, maybe they're know the newest styles, they have the best products, etc. Lots of ways to get competitive advantage depending on your business. Same thing in large organizations as well. Let's bring this to L&D. How can we create competitive advantages with L&D? I'm going to list 9 things we can do, and then a few things that don't give us a competitive advantage. And then I'll ask you later if you can think of other things. So here we go. One thing, and this is, where I played a lot of time, spent a lot of time doing learning sciences, but learning sciences. In the book, I have 4 chapters on this, and I talk about retrieval practice and the spacing effect and simulating learning and feedback. And if you do those 4 things well, the science suggests that you're going to be able to increase your the learner's remembering by 100%. That's double your learning results. Now you have 2 organizations. One learning team is creating 100% improvement, and the other team is not. That's a major competitive advantage. And then there's the performance sciences. And these are so new that they really do give us an opportunity for doing things that our competitors are not doing. And when I say performance sciences, I'm talking about like habit sciences and nudging, network science, persuasion, creativity, growth mindset, performance triggering, and things like that, where it's not about learning, but it's about triggering and enabling performance. These are so new, most of us aren't doing these, but those learning teams who are implementing these have a competitive advantage against learning teams that are not doing that. Another thing we can do is we can help managers enable learning. Managers are the glue in our organizations. And if we can help managers help their team members learn, those team members can be more productive, more creative, more fulfilled. That's a major competitive advantage. And this learning creates a ripple effect. So you have a team that learns better, that team's going to work better, and then they're going to help each other learn, and then they're going to touch other people in the organization. They'll help them learn better. Creates a sort of cyclical ripple effect. I used to be a leadership trainer. In fact, I ran a leadership development product line, and I would teach managers how to be better leaders. And I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say this now, but I never once taught my managers how to help their direct reports learn better. And that's a major missed opportunity. Speaking of leadership development, there's a lot of leadership development ideas out there that are based on popular books, popular leadership gurus that aren't really based on research. We're not really sure if they really make a difference. So one organization, if they create leadership content aligned with research, not on popular books, etc., they can create a competitive advantage over other organizations who are teaching unproven content. Better learning evaluation. You knew I would bring this up, right? Better learning evaluation helps us make better learning design decisions, which helps us create more effective learning and more learning transfer. We need learning evaluation frameworks with learning wisdom baked into them. So let me give you an example through LTEM. It's a one-page framework, and I'm going to compare it to the traditional model, the Kirkpatrick-Edsall 4-level model of learning evaluation. You'll note how this is level 1, 2, 3, and 4. The traditional model puts all learning in one bucket. And that's problematic because when we measure at level 2 learning, we could be measuring the regurgitation of trivia. We could be measuring recall or recognition of meaningless information or meaningful information. We could be measuring decision making or task performance or skills. Now think about that. That's a wide continuum from trivia to skills. But what do we typically do? Oh, we need a level 2. Oh, let's do a knowledge check. And we know knowledge on its own is not good enough. So what LTEM does is it separates learning into knowledge, decision-making, and task performance. And by doing this, it helps us in the learning design process and the learning evaluation process, bring learning wisdom back into that conversation. So here's the idea. We create a competitive advantage when we design our evaluation practices using frameworks that integrate science of learning wisdom. So you imagine 2 learning teams. One is using a framework where they're getting insights about their learning designs based on the science, and another one is not. The one that is getting a competitive advantage. Another thing we can do is seed ideas across learning. So we typically think about sharing ideas within a course, right? But why not seed important ideas through other channels? So for example, let's say our organization that it's been decided from the very top that we need to be more creative and more innovative. Well, don't just teach a course on creativity and innovation, but seed those creativity exercises and thinking throughout many, many courses. We know from the research on learning that repetition is good, that spaced repetitions are even better, and spaced practice through repetitions even better. So let's if we do that and our competitors are not doing that, we're going to get a competitive advantage. Well, at Gen AI, we're all trying to learn Gen AI projects. Well, let's not just have a course on prompt engineering. Let's put mini Gen AI projects in many of our technical training programs to give people multiple opportunities in realistic performance contexts. We could add growth mindset triggers everywhere. We could seed company values. Sometimes we want to not just teach the values in our onboarding programs. So if we do these things, if we're seeding ideas across learning and our competitors are not, we're going to gain a competitive advantage. And by the way, all this competitive advantage stuff, we can flip it. We can say, hey, if our competitors are doing this and we're not, then we are at a competitive disadvantage. Learning request process is another way to gain a competitive advantage. We are sometimes order takers and we get learning requests. And what if we had a learning request process that nudged us and our sponsors to consider factors and solutions beyond training, that helped us align with more effective research-aligned practices and create better learning? We have a process that nudges us to think about those things, we're going to be better off. Next to last one, enabling inclusive learning, learning teams that better support all our learners. We want to support all our learners, not just some of them. One way to do that is to make sure, measure how well we're doing this. I've been involved in a 3-year research effort, and we have just published our survey questions. These are learner survey questions that enable us to examine how well we're including all our learners. It's at this website. Ingeborg Kraus is my partner on this. She's from the Netherlands and a expert in inclusive learning. She did her doctoral dissertation on this. It's really been a pleasure to work with. And the final one, workflow learning hacks. We tend to think of our job as creating training, but if we can help people learn in the work, we can create competitive advantage for our organization as well. It's a competitive advantage to have employees who are learning more deeply in collaboration every day. Now, you might wonder what this workflow learning might look like. Let's take a look. First of all, it's not training in disguise. It's not brown bag lunches. It's not community of practice. It's learning in the work. So some examples of this. We can do after action reviews. If we encourage people after projects, after meetings, after initiatives, to just take time to review. Hey, what did we do well? What did we do not so well? What should we change for next time? That's a way to learn. Another thing we can do is use pre-mortems or pre-victoriums. So a pre-mortem is a term coined by Gary Klein, brilliant cognitive psychologist, and brilliant in bringing that research wisdom into practice. He had this idea, we do a post-mortem, something goes wrong, and then we do a post-mortem and we analyze what went wrong. He said, well, do it in the beginning, the start of a project. Imagine the future and your project has gone terribly wrong. Think about all the things that might have gone wrong. And then when you do that, you can circumnavigate them. And pre-victoriums is a new idea. It's doing the same thing at the beginning of a project. You get together and you imagine in the future that your project has gone brilliantly. Everything's working really well. And then you figure out, well, what was it that enabled it to go really well? This is a great way to learn in the work. Another thing we can do is just create an experimental mindset. Instead of wrangling and wrangling and wrangling and go analysis paralysis, trial, pilot, try things out. We learn by doing that. And also, scientists have found that in the history of human beings, the evolution of human beings, one of the things we developed is this beautiful ability to wrangle and learn from dissenting. Now, we got to do this in a respectful way with psychological safety, but this is another way to learn. And the final way is guided cognition. And to do this, I'm gonna do a little thought experiment with you. So I'm going to give you a category name and ask you to come up with an example of a member of that category. So for example, if I said dog as the category name, you would say golden retriever, collie, etc. And why don't you pick two things? You might think when I say dog, you might think of cat, but cat is not a member of the dog family. It's not a member of that category. All right, so here we go. And I'm going to give a category name and see what you come up with. Put the first two things you think of, put those in the chat. And the category name is vegetable. Michelle, I see you came up with cabbage and parsnips. Maybe stew, we're thinking. I don't know. Tomatoes aren't vegetables. Well, that's not, yeah, depends on, anyway, I'm not going to get into that debate. All right. So I want you to look through there and you'll probably see a number of carrots in there. And when people do this as an experiment, they find out the carrot's often the most common thing. We've got a lot of things, but the most common one we come up with, and we got a whole bunch of people here, but if you have a smaller group, think about that. Think about how humans work. We tend to come up when we're brainstorming, when we're problem solving, when we're thinking about things, we tend to come up with carrot ideas. And that's fine, but if we've been working on a problem, probably we've thought of all the carrot ideas. When we're brainstorming, we probably think of all the carrot ideas. We don't think about other things. Human beings, our thinking is not always as good as it could be. So one thing we can do is guide cognition to help people learn in the workflow. I'm going to give you an example from our own work. So we got a learning team together. We're building a new learning design, a new learning program. And we got all our smart people in there, but what are they going to tend to come up with? They're going to tend to come up with carrot ideas, right? Well, how can we do this? Well, one thing I've done in the past is use something like the learning maximizers model. Say, hey, these are the 8 goals that we should have when we design learning. Think about these before we brainstorm our learning designs. So you can see it nudges things like, hey, we should have support for decision-making competence, for full task competence, for long-term remembering. If we hadn't had something to guide cognition in this way, we might not think of some of these things. Just an example, if we can enable this workflow learning with our employees in our organization, we can create a competitive advantage. All right, flip side, what lessens competitive advantage? Okay, obviously doing what everybody else is doing. There's no advantage in that. Following traditional practices, using legacy models and solutions, relying on industry survey research, right? We survey the industry, we get a whole bunch of L&D people to tell us what they're thinking, what they're doing. Well, if everybody's thinking that, those are the carrot ideas, that doesn't give us a competitive advantage. We have to go beyond that. Accepting the role of order taker, not evaluating our learning. If we're not evaluating the learning, we're not getting feedback on our learning interventions. Not educating our rookies. There's so many new people join our field every year, and if we don't support them and really educate them, help them learn, they're going to be not as effective as they might be. And not being lifelong learners ourselves. We're in the learning business. We have to be lifelong learners. All right. So I've suggested 9 things we can do. In the book, there's many more. I've suggested some things that don't give us a competitive advantage. But here's our CEO. She is very happy now. We have helped create competitive advantage. Here's the thing. We can hope that our senior leaders will help empower us. And maybe they will. Some of them will. Some of them are already good at it. But ideally, we know that that's not going to happen. Not ideally, but we know that that's not always going to happen. And what we need to do for ourselves is empower ourselves by thinking about how we can create competitive advantage. And when we're talking the language of competitive advantage, that aligns with what our senior leaders are thinking. That aligns us with the business, gives us more opportunity to get a seat at the table. So I've got some reflection questions for you. We're going to have a little bit of time for your questions, your reflections, but here's some reflection triggers for you. So what is your team doing to create competitive advantages? What is your team doing that limits advantages? What would have the biggest impact on your organization? So I mentioned 9 things. Which one of those might have the biggest impact in your organization? What could your learning team do right away? What could you do right away? And I was looking over this slide earlier today, and I noticed, hey, yes, the U is right in the middle of the slide. Is that instructional design brilliance or what? What obstacles would you want to circumnavigate? I don't know. What else could you do to create competitive advantage? I mentioned 9 things. Maybe you have some other ideas. What benefits might result from auditing your learning team's practices in terms of competitive advantage? You know, we get a health checkup once a year. We get our cars checked up once a year. Why don't we do this with our learning teams? Take a reflection, either bring in somebody from the outside or do it ourselves and diagnose what our strengths and limitations are. All right, so those are some ideas. Share your reflections, comments in the chat. What do you think about all this stuff? And while you're doing that, I am going to be sharing some ways you can learn more, and then we'll open it up to your questions and comments. All right, to learn more. First, you can go to the book. Again, it's for both senior leaders and us. Chapters are available. So these chapters I put on LinkedIn, and there's links to these, and we'll share some of those. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the titles here. There's that learning request process. 28 things you can think about in terms of learning strategy. Not all research is good. And that article, the chapter on learning data. If you want to learn more about LTEM, you can go to the LTEM website. You can check out the boot camp. people have liked it very much. So we're going to open it up to your questions and reflections. I'm going to take this off the screen. If you want to grab this, feel free to get in touch with me.
So one of the first questions just coming in was, how do I know that what I'm doing is actually going to produce competitive advantage with other organizations? I suppose that's been the main focus of the session today, but
well, how do you know if you've been successful in doing that?
yeah, how do you know if you've been successful? Yeah.
Well, I think we have to sort of look at the tea leaves on this, right? Obviously, we should be doing good evaluations so we know how well we're doing. We can sit in our cubicles, in our offices, in our homes if we're working remotely and crank stuff out. But we probably should be looking around the industry and seeing what everybody else is doing so we know how we're can do better. Yeah, those two things I think are critical, sort of understanding the landscape of our industry and measuring ourselves and, maybe getting some outside advice. There's a bunch of consultants out there that are looking out at many different organizations across the industry, and they can give you some insights about that.
Just also waiting for some more questions to come in. One of the things that people were mentioning in the chat before was that disconnect between leadership teams and people doing the work or leading the projects. And how can you get L&D teams to align more closely with leadership teams and make sure there's an alignment there? There's not just people working in isolation.
Well, obviously, we need to be reaching out and having conversations, and sort of building that into our practices where we can. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's going to take a change management effort. Sometimes our organizational leaders want a hands-off approach to L&D. So I think, one of the things we can think about the people side of this, networking, but I also think that the other thing that's critical is building really good practices and supporting those and talking about those in our reporting and every time we have a touch point with senior leadership that we can show some of those results.
Thanks. Well, a great question from Nikki here, which I think is really relevant. Nikki's saying, how do you tackle the impression of like survey fatigue or the question not to bother employees with effectiveness interviews afterwards?
Yeah, that is a big one. I wrote a book on learner surveys, and I talked to a lot of people who are using them, and that's one of the biggest concerns. How do we not survey fatigue folks? There's two things that are critically important. Number one, we have to ask good questions. If we ask a bunch of Likert scales, numeric scales, questions that the learners know, if they don't know it consciously, they know it subconsciously, that we're not getting that good of data from this, then they're not going to give their full attention to them. If we give them good surveys, they're going to complain less about survey fatigue. Also, we can ask fewer questions, and we can rotate our questions. If we give a learner survey and we have come out with 10 priorities, that's no good. So let's say maybe this first 6 months, we're going to focus on motivating our learners to apply what they've learned. We'll have a question about that in our surveys. After 6 months, we take it out because we've worked on that. We had a question about after training follow through, and then we focus on that for 6 months, et cetera. So that's critical. The other thing is give people time during learning. This is actually, researchers have studied this. If you want to increase your response rates, then give your learners the learner surveys during your learning interventions. Not after, don't even wait 5 seconds after the class to send a link, but give them time during the learning. There's a lot of things, in fact, in the second edition of my book, I had to add a chapter on how to get better response rates because it is a big problem.
Thanks, Will. we're running out of time for this session, but there's quite a few questions here. So I'm going to ask a few more now and then we're going to have a break. But Stephen's asking a question, which I think is true of a lot of people using Total actually. Sometimes L&D departments are quite small. So Stephen's saying there's lots of reference to our learning team, but Will, what advice would you offer to people who have teams of 1 or small teams, 2, 3 people?
Yeah, so in some ways, well, first of all, I feel for you. I've talked to people who are the sole training person in their thing, and sometimes they feel isolated. If you're really small, you know, first build a good connection between yourselves and do what you can. You know, we're not aiming for perfection. My feeling about our work is, hey, let's do a diagnosis. Let's do a gap analysis. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? How can we get there? How can we move toward that? We're not aiming for perfection. We're not ever going to create the ideal, but if we move toward that, and you know, keep track of your mental state. You know, don't burn yourselves out. You know, try to find some small successes. Stay active. The one advantage small departments have is there's less bureaucracy. You can try stuff out. You know, find some early adopters with your trainers, your subject matter experts, or try stuff out yourself. You don't have to do it in a big way. You don't have to do a full learning evaluation study, you know, spending tens of thousands of dollars or pounds or euros. You know, just do a little bit better than you're doing before and keep at it. You know, we're all doing the best we can. And, you know, sometimes that's good enough.